Okay. All right, so notice I'm jumping straight to Roman numeral 3. So in the beginning of the chapter, it's going to talk about the Chesapeake region, the Scots-Irish, things like that. You want to learn that. You want to look up those terms, be familiar with that, because that will be on the test. But we're going to jump right here into Africans in America. And again, we're going to talk about slavery here. It's very kind of cursory. It's not very long. We'll spend more time on it later. And I like to talk, obviously, about slavery when we get to the Civil War. And I'd like to tie it into modern-day slavery. So we'll kind of take a hiatus to talk about that, because I think that's a really important issue. So, deepest South. Slave life was severe. So deepest South, we're talking about the southern Carolina. We're talking about Georgia. It was a very difficult, humid atmosphere to be in, to work in. It was a draining, like life draining. Many slaves did not live very long lives, and they're mainly working with rice. Indigo's there too, but basically the main crop in South Carolina is rice there. And so it's a pretty lonely life for slaves at that time. In the Chesapeake region, it's going to be tobacco. So when you look at the map here, you want to think all the way down in the south, which you can't see on the video, sorry about that, but all the way down the south, at this point we're talking rice, and then here in the Chesapeake we're talking tobacco. Okay? Tobacco plantations not as spread out as rice. The crop itself takes less space to get enough to actually sell it and produce a crop. In the Chesapeake region, it's very interesting. Because of the proximity of the plantations, slaves can actually move between the plantations, and there's a decent amount of freedom. I had an opportunity to take a class on a Harriet Tubman tour down in the Chesapeake, and they just had a lot of freedom. Like on the weekends, they could go see other slaves at other plantations, and they're permitted just to walk there. It's not like they need an armed escort, which is fascinating because you think, well, wouldn't you take any opportunity just to run north and get away from it? And a lot of them did not. That's why Harriet Tubman could be so successful. She could come in and help them escape because there's a lot of freedom. And part of it was because the punishment was so severe if you got caught. That's kind of how they kept them in check. So they start to have family lives. They start to have marriages. You could marry someone on a different plantation. If so, the child that was born was the masters of the female owner. They got them. So in the Chesapeake region, we see a lot of the increase in slavery mainly coming through natural production. And in a way, the masters often treated them like cattle. They would have them to reproduce. Okay. So we'll also see slaves in the north. That'll grow as well. In this early part, obviously, slavery will not be a part of the north in the long run. We good? Okay. So they helped in different parts of the economy, especially in the Chesapeake area where they learned some skills. Like they could be carpenters, they could be bricklayers, they could be tanners. Most of them will be manual laborers, but we do see this, especially in the Chesapeake region, where they'll learn some skills, and that can obviously help them be more developed and usually obtain their freedom a little bit easier. There was resistance to the oppression. So there's the New York Slave Revolt, and I don't know if you would have seen this. This came up several times in the course of this summer as people are getting re-educated on slavery in America, that many people were totally unaware that in 1712 there was a large slave revolt in New York City, because slavery was permitted at that time in New York City. The most famous and probably significant for you guys is the Stono River Revolt. In South Carolina, we had a slave revolt where slaves rose up, banded together, stole weapons, killed about 20 white people, and took off. Now, why this is significant is this is the largest slave revolt in history, and it was 60 slaves. So just to give you kind of a concept, like there aren't that many slave revolts, and they're not that massive, and it's pretty fascinating that it never happens. They're held in such isolation. There's so much control. They can't read. They can't write. They can't learn. Like it was very difficult to organize any kind of revolt. So the largest one here is South Carolina, about 60 slaves. They kill about 20 white people. They head south, most likely trying to get to Spain because Spain had promised slaves freedom if they got there, Spanish Florida. And by nightfall, the South Carolinians had found and killed about half of them. And then within the next couple weeks, almost all will be found and hanged. I always say hanged. I think it's hanged, right? Okay. So, what'd you say? Yes. So it's hanged, I believe. So this is the largest again, and it doesn't even compare to like what other rebellion did we see that led to slavery? Okay, much larger. Okay, they killed Native Americans. They burned the city of Jamestown. So the indentured servants create a massive revolt. This is the largest one we see. So that's important to remember, be familiar with. Let's see. I'm going to skip through this. Skip through that. Again, I want you reading this. I want you seeing it. But I won't go through it right now for the sake of time. Here's an example of an advertisement, just so you can kind of see the mentality of the people there. This is a good primary source to look at. To be sold on board the ship Banks Island. Sorry, so we're not doing much with this. I'm doing this in my other class. Oftentimes in print and in writing, their S's will look like F's. So that says island. On Tuesday, the 6th of May, next at Ashley Ferry, a choice cargo of about 250 fine, healthy Negroes just arrived from the Windward and Rice Coast. The utmost care has already been taken and shall be continued to keep them free from the least danger of being infected with the smallpox. No boat having been on board and all other communication with people from Charleston prevented. So obviously there had been smallpox outbreak at Charleston. They're saying, hey, we're keeping them separate from that. And so this is an ad. And they're arguing here, hey, they've already had the smallpox, so they're free from it. But you'd see these kind of routine ads where they boast about their strength, boast about their health, and we'll watch kind of a documentary on this later where you hear some of this, and it's just heartbreaking to us when they hear them described like cattle, basically looking at what their teeth were like, their bodies were like. So, but we'll do more on that later. Looking here, this stuff tends to be important for the AP exam. They like to know this, or maybe have you compare this. So again, rice and indigo is down here. Cattle and grain, you'll see, is more inland and in the north. Tobacco is in this region here. So just have that mindset here, here, and here. The proclamation line, we'll talk about 1763. Actually, we'll see it in the video here. Really important to understand the proclamation line, but we'll see that in a minute, so I won't discuss it here. Triangular trade route, you want to be familiar with that. Here's a map of it. Again, looking at what's coming from and coming down here. And the middle passage is taking them from Africa to the Americas. So you have two triangles here. You've got one coming from Europe to Africa, to the colonies, back to Europe. Then you got the northern colonies coming to Africa, to the West Indies or the South, then back up here. So you got kind of two different triangles. The most famous one is this one, but the New England colonies, especially Rhode Island, New York, were also engaged in their own triangular trade route. What are they selling down here? Rum, okay? One of the number one kind of products that Africans wanted was alcohol. So again, even that you can see is like disappointing, but obviously because they're just getting them addicted to alcohol and then they need it, so they're kidnapping their own people to sell to get alcohol. So from New England, they'd come down here with rum that they produced, get slaves, they take those slaves off into the West Indies where they'd get what? What do you need to make rum? Sugar, okay? So you need some grain too, but down here in the West Indies, you're gonna get sugar. So they get the sugar here, come back, make the rum, come down, sell the rum, get the slaves, sell the slaves, get the sugar, and up. So that's how it went primarily for the New Englanders. That's what they're trading.
What was on that? Can you walk through the other trade route?
Yeah, so we'll see here again, manufactured products just kind of coming down here. Oftentimes guns, but clothing, things like that coming from Europe. They get the slaves, take them here, and then here they're getting raw goods. So fish, furs, naval stores here. Meat, fish, and rum kind of coming over. So generally, and this goes to mercantilism, what England wanted was raw goods. Then they'd finish those off, either sell them back to the colonies, take them down here to get the slaves, or they'd go over here, trade them for raw goods, and then back. So we got rice and indigo and furs coming this way, sugar and molasses, finished goods coming this way, all so that England could get what? And Europe could get what? According to mercantilism. What do they want? Their what?
Like their fair share.
No, so it's an economic theory. So we might not have covered it yet. Mercantilism, goal of it. What did you say?
Money.
Money, kind of. Specific kind of money. Okay, so we haven't gone over this yet. Gold and silver. Okay, so economic theories really drive the world. I don't love economics. You have to take it next year, but it is important because without mercantilism, we might not have the Revolutionary War. Because mercantilism told the Europeans, and specifically the English, hey, only let your colonies produce raw goods, no finished products. Because if you get raw goods, you give them gold to get raw goods here, then you create hats, then you create iron, finished iron, then you create boats for shipping, and then you send that back here so that you do the shipping and you sell the hats and you create the molasses and everything. So the gold ends up in England, and that frustrates the colonists. When you tell them they can't make hats anymore, they can't finish any products, they can only produce raw goods. That's very frustrating to the colonists. So without that, they don't treat their colonies this way. Maybe we don't have a Revolutionary War. Today, what's our economic theory today? Republicans' economic theory. It's called trickle-down economics. Someone explain it?
This is a really rough explanation.
Okay.
But isn't it? This is probably wrong, but the one thing, it's like the rich give to the poor, or like
Kinda.
roughly.
What does Trump do? What do the Republicans do? They what?
There's like big corporations and like trickle down to smaller companies.
Very good. So who does he give the tax breaks to? Corporations, wealthy people. So according to the Republicans, according to Trump, the way you build a strong economy is you give your hardest working, your most successful, you give them the tax breaks. That way they take that money, and since we already know they're successful and hardworking, they're probably going to start more businesses, create more jobs, and so it trickles down. So the concept is it's slow, but it creates a robust economy because your best and brightest are motivated to make more money. Giving them more money just motivates them more, and so it creates a robust economy that slowly trickles down to those at the lowest end. Democrats, what's their view?
Yeah.
What'd you say?
The opposite.
The opposite, okay? So they tax the wealthy because they think the wealthy, well, they're selfish, they're gonna hold on to that money. We need to take from them and infuse that money into the lowest because they're the ones that need it. They need a livable wage. They're not making enough money. Who's gonna look out for them? So they take from the wealthy, tax them heavily, tax corporations, and push that into the lower classes to build the economy that way, because then those people have buying power. Those people have better houses. So it's two different approaches, but notice like mercantilism frustrates the colonies. The Republican policy, who's it frustrate? The trickle-down economics, who gets frustrated with that?
The bottom.
The bottom people, all right? And this is the Democratic platform. We'll say it over and over again. He's giving tax breaks to his rich friends, okay? Trying to exploit that frustration of they've got more than we do. There's a gap between them and us. So very real frustration there, just like the colonies have a frustration. The other side, the welfare state, who's that frustrate? The Democrats taking money from the rich, giving it to the poor. Frustrates the rich, right? They're like, I'm working hard and I get even less money. Like, why work hard? If you're gonna take away 50 to 70% of my salary, why do I have any motivation to produce more? So that frustrates them, and they're rich and powerful, so they obviously have a say in politics as well. So these are the two economic theories and who they frustrate, and we kind of have a balance between the two, which is probably good. As we go back and forth between the two, it's probably good rather than one just winning out. So that's why it's important to understand this, because it frustrates groups and it leads to kind of power changes in that way. That's further on that topic than I want to go. But Know the Molasses Act? The British passed the Molasses Act. This is one of the first ones that will frustrate the colonies. It basically, they were saying, North America, you cannot trade with the West Indies anymore. So to get molasses, you need that sugar, and the British were basically saying, we will provide you with sugar, like we want that sugar, we want you to buy molasses from us, you can't get this from the West Indies anymore because they're French, and that frustrates the colonists, and that'll lead to certain people like John Hancock becoming smugglers, where it's like illegally going down there and getting that sugar, illegally getting tea because the British say they can't. So smuggling comes out of that, and obviously more frustrations with Britain because of it. Not gonna worry about books yet. You can think about that. Okay, last one, then I'll stop. Zanger trial, really, really important. Abe Push loves this. You'll see it in there. Peter Zanger, he wrote a story in the paper about a corrupt royal governor. That governor arrests him. It goes to trial. And basically, so this is a 1734, 1735, okay? First Great Awakening time, nowhere near our own country yet. It goes to trial, and basically what the court system in the colonies said is that true statements about public officials, that's not slander, okay? So if you have something that's libel, if I go out and I just start saying things about you guys that aren't true, I can be prosecuted for libel. If I, hurt your business and none of that was true, you could take me to court and be like, there's no evidence of this, and I could be found liable for that. So if it is true, you can say it about government officials. This is key. It's a freedom of the press kind of case. It prevents the government officials from just throwing in prison anyone who criticizes them. And so the Zanger case is really important for that. So be familiar with the Zanger trial. Open discussion required by diverse society, freedom of the press. Okay, 12:06. Let's start this video.